on a specific subset, I should say, of kids who were at the Parkland school at Marjorie Stoneman High School when this happened. And it's a very specific subset. And you know all their names, right? You know Cameron Kasky, you've seen him on TV. And you know Emma Gonzalez, you've seen her on TV as well. And she has now over 1 million Twitter followers after having basically 0 Twitter followers a week ago because the media have really been pushing her out there. And of course, David Hogg, who's been on every TV show that he can possibly find. Now, they have every right to speak as much as they want. And we have every right to criticize them as much as we want because this is still the United States of America. And just because you went through something tough does not mean that you are an expert on what happened or why it happened. It just means that you're an expert on suffering, as I've said here on the show a bunch of times. Okay, but nonetheless, we are being treated to the awkward spectacle of these kids being trotted out there by a compliant media that actually, as Charlie Cook over at National Review says, are laundering their views through the moral bank accounts of these students. All the people in the media wish they could call for a ban for guns every day on the air. They can't. So instead, they bring on these kids to do it for them. That's the whole goal of having these kids as guests. And the kids are saying things that are just insipid. David Hogg particularly is a very bad spokesman for his point of view. Just because he's a good-looking kid who can complete a sentence doesn't mean anything he says makes any sense. And again, this is not a rip on him as a victim. This is a rip on him as political commentator. You either say things that are intelligent or you don't. And your experiences have nothing to do with it. This is a form of identity politics. In the same way that the left will maintain that your opinion should be gauged, not based on the actual content or value of your opinion, but based on the color of your skin, your ethnicity, your religion, your background. Instead of doing it on that basis, they're saying that we should now judge the decency of your viewpoint or the genius of your viewpoint based solely on whether you went through a terrible experience at a school shooting. So here is David Hogg suggesting once again for the umpteenth time that politicians don't care about kids' lives. He cares deeply about kids' lives, David Hogg. He cares so deeply that he's called for a boycott of Amazon. He's called for a boycott of the state of Florida because there's nothing like harming those family business owners down in Miami Beach. You have to make sure that those new immigrants can't sell their tacos during spring break. We've got to make sure that doesn't happen. So he wants people to boycott Florida until the gun laws in Florida change. He has spoken at a rally in New Jersey. He is pushing for a boycott against FedEx. He says he's not going to go back to school until he gets what he wants. Well, tough. I mean, then don't go back to school. That's not true anyway. He will be back at school. In any case, he was doing this routine again yesterday. Politicians don't care about kids' lives. This is the worst form of demagoguery, and here he is saying it.
These politicians don't care about these children's lives. Notice how the only action being taken, for example, with Rick Scott, is after he is running for Senate to try to take Bill Nelson's seat. That's what's going on here. People need to acknowledge that. And like with Marco Rubio, for example, the man must be a professional dancer just like other politicians because he's great at sidestepping questions. At the CNN town hall, he turned a one-word answer into a 5-sentence shenanigan, emitting propaganda from the NRA and repeating his false message that he's going to continue to accept money from the NRA, just making sure that people don't understand that and they're distracted by him trying to turn it into a long answer so he can get reelected. And it's disgusting.
He didn't obstruct at all. He said he would continue to take money from the NRA because he's a proponent of Second Amendment rights. I mean, Senator Rubio was perfectly honest on that special about whether he would take money from the NRA. Again, when David Hogg says all of these very, very silly things, when he suggests that it's about the governor, Rick Scott, or it's about the senator, Marco Rubio, Bill Nelson has nothing to do with it, right? Bill Nelson has all the right views, so that's totally fine. This is the same guy, David Hogg, who went on TV and defended Scott Israel, the actual sheriff of Broward County, right? The guy who's botched everything. The entire first part of the show is about all of the botchery by the sheriff's office. And yet somehow Rick Scott is responsible for the deputy not doing his job, but the sheriff's office is not responsible for the deputy doing his job. Pretty astonishing stuff. Pretty astonishing stuff. So David Hogg goes out there and he says this sort of nonsense. And then, of course, he is feted by the media for it. So Jimmy Fallon does the same thing. Here's Jimmy Fallon praising the Parkland students and suggesting that they are all heroes and he is going to march with them. So it's not enough, by the way, that we have one pope of politics in Jimmy Kimmel on late night. Now we have to have two popes of politics on late night. Jimmy Fallon joins Jimmy Kimmel in this effort. Stephen Colbert, of course, has been the Pope of politics before, so we actually have the Holy Roman Empire, and the kingship is passed around, the emperorship is passed around between various parties depending on how the ratings are. Fallon wants to get in the game because he's been ripped as too anodyne, as too lackluster, as not political enough by a lot of the left-wing commentators, and therefore he wants to get in the game. So here's Jimmy Fallon doing his best Jimmy Kimmel impression. He needs to grow a little bit of stubble and cry if he really wants to do this right.
I think what the students of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School are doing is unbelievable. They're speaking out with more guts, passion, conviction, and common sense than most adults. They're high school students. It's beyond impressive. That strength that they have, it's inspiring. They are angry, and they're doing something about it and creating change. This is a real revolution. And they have organized a peaceful march on Saturday, March 24th in Washington, D.C., to demand action to prevent gun violence. I just want to say I stand behind you guys, and I will be marching alongside you with my wife and 2 children in D.C. to show our support.
Wow, how nice. I mean, all the late night hosts immediately coming out and signaling, virtue signaling, that everything that these kids have to say is wonderful, the bravery, the decency. Okay, they're not going to talk to, some of the other students. They're not going to talk to, some of the people who I've recommended that they talk to on the show. They're not going to talk to Kyle Kashuv, who still is unverified on Twitter, by the way. Thank you for following him. He's one of the students there who disagrees with some of these other students, but he, of course, is not appearing every single day. You don't know his name because he's not on CNN or MSNBC every single day. Still, as I say, unverified on Twitter. No shock there. But again, this is what the entire Hollywood infrastructure is going to do. The Oscars will be about that on Sunday night. You watch. They were going to do Me Too, but now this obviously allows them to virtue signal on another topic. Now, never mind that half the people in the audience have done movies in which guns are glorified as the way of stopping violence. Never mind that all those people are millionaires who are protected by armed security outside. You watch on Sunday during the Oscars, the entire thing will be about how we need to get rid of guns in our society, and then presumably all of our action movies can be Bruce Lee-style karate fights. That's basically what all of these things will turn into. So there's a problem with the suggestion that the children shall lead us and that the kids shall lead us. It's a different problem even than the identity politics question of does victimhood confer expertise? And that is, a lot of kids are not all that bright. I mean, I'm not saying these kids who are speaking on TV aren't bright. For their age, I'm sure they're very bright. I'm talking about, are these kids, are kids in general capable of the kind of decision-making that adults are capable of? And the answer, as a general rule, is no, which is why, of course, we have legal restrictions on kids buying cigarettes and kids buying alcohol and kids buying guns and all the rest of this sort of thing. There's a reason that 16-year-olds don't vote. Now, there are a lot of people who have gotten on my case for saying this because I was writing syndicated columns at 17. Well, that's fine. I was taking flack at 17, too. And there were people saying I was too young to write columns then. And some of the stuff I wrote, I think was dumb. Like, if I look back at the stuff that I wrote when I was 17, I think a lot of it's good. I think some of it's not so good. And I hope that I've matured over a period of time. People generally do. But that's sort of the point. When you grant this pure virtue to children to be our political leaders, it doesn't end well. So I'm going to show you some video of it not ending well. So over in Bakersfield yesterday, there was a student protest over guns. Now, why there should be a student protest over guns in Bakersfield, in the state with the most gun restrictions in America, right? California, where I live, has incredible gun restrictions. There was a protest over in Bakersfield, and the kids, of course, used this as an excuse to leave school and basically run roughshod through the community. Because, let's face it, most of the kids who are getting involved in this cause are not doing so because they want the extra credit in class or because they deeply care about the issue or know anything about the issue. They're doing it because it's fun. Just like most protesters do things because they are fun. Okay, so here's some video of the kids, and notice how the adults essentially let them have their way because, after all, kids are our moral leaders now. This is clip 16.
Hundreds of students took to the streets to protest gun violence. These students from Stagg High School were told by officers to disperse the streets. The Stockton School District says what started out as a peaceful protest on campus turned rowdy as about 100 of 300 students jumped the fence of the school. Some were seen throwing rocks at cars, including police cars.
I'm really upset that I'm on my way to school. Like, I go to Delta College, so I'm on my way to school and I can't even get in my car now. I'm about to cry.
Okay, yeah, those are the kids who ought to lead us. Those are the kids who ought to lead us. Now, not every kid is these kids, obviously, but to suggest that children are the wisest among us, yeah, no, they're not. Okay, I have 2 kids. I remember being as young as these kids. When you're 14, 15 years old, you don't have there's not a lot going on upstairs that prevents you from doing stupid things. This is in Stockton, not Bakersfield, obviously. But when you grant absolute moral immunity to kids because they are young, you end up with worse kids. One of the worst things that you can do as a parent is suggest to your children that they have the absolute moral immunity to do whatever they want. Parenting is about teaching and cultivating children. It is not about granting children leadership positions and suggesting that in the absence of knowledge they ought to lead us because, after all, they're so innocent and the innocent children among us shall lead. I think that's just absolutely silly. Now, these kids and their impact is they wouldn't be making this sort of they wouldn't be as big a phenomenon as they've become, except that the media have obviously magnified their influence to tremendous effect.